You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Bill Blankenship, welcome to the Daily People podcast.
How are you doing, my brother? Good to
I'm
see
good,
you.
man. I'm
It's
good.
been a little while.
It has been. So let's see here. I think you and I probably parted ways in, what was it, spring of 2017, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yes, sir.
So I met Coach Blankenship at Fayetteville High School, probably my third year of coaching. I was still in college, but he is the mystery man that came in for 1 year and won a state championship. What was that like coming in and just being that guy?
It was a pretty weird time of my career. I short term, I won't try to chase every rabbit here, John Mark, but I was a high school coach for 23 years. I got into the college ranks. Spent 8 years at the University of Tulsa as an assistant coach, and then later as a head coach. Got fired, which happens to some of us in this business.
Mm-hmm.
And had spent a year at Memphis with a former player of mine, Justin Fuente, and on that staff. And I'd actually gone home to semi-retire and gonna, let them continue paying me out and just enjoy life. And got a weird phone call, actually about 3 of them from different people saying, "Hey, the Fayetteville job is open. I sure think you'd like to have that." And I'm like, "No, I wouldn't. I don't have any interest in that job." And finally, a buddy of mine that I highly respect, Rick Jones, who'd been down at Greenwood for years and is now at the University of Missouri. Rick called me. He's like, "Bill, I'm just telling you, I think this is a fit for you, and I think it's a fit for them. I think you ought to check into it." And see, what's crazy about that, as you might remember or might not, that was June.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't the normal time that you take jobs. They'd had some drama at Fayetteville, and their coach had left late in the year like that. And so this was come take a job and meet with them. A fantastic place. Place that had won a lot of games and had just won a championship the previous year. But the caveat was, look, we want you. We think you're the right guy, but you need to keep the whole staff. We're already into June. There's no building a staff. There's none of that. Come and just kind of hang on. And then maybe in the off season, you can start putting your fingerprints on it a little more. And so I don't know, man, I still am kind of amazed. I am a believer, and so faith plays into that a little bit. I think God directed it, and we showed up, and it was kind of like, I'm just going to ride this out and try to kind of CEO it a little bit. And little by little, I just fell in love with the guys and the place and the staff, and we had a, as you know, you were part of it, a fabulous year.
It was an incredible year. I was so blown away because where I'm from in Texas, a new guy comes in and he basically cleans house and starts over. And so watching you come in, and there was no micromanaging done in my reflection. It was just, you came in, we implemented a new offense. Our defensive coordinator was allowed to just continue doing what he had done the previous year. And we got after it. What was it, 13-1 that we went that year?
Right.
So, I mean, it was incredible for a new guy to come in, lead through the transition, and then get us out on the other side with a ring on our finger.
Well, and the amazing thing about it is it really transitioned even through the transition. And, some of the coaches that well, Benji Mahan and some of the other offensive guys, I inherited an incredible offense. I mean, these guys were highly successful. We had an outstanding quarterback. He had thrown for about 6,000 yards the previous 2 years. It wasn't like this thing was broken. And I had every intention of just, I just kind of followed along all summer, and we went to the 7-on-7 camps or to the tournaments and to the camps. And, I'm kind of just like, I'm just going to ride this out and let this kind of be a learning year for me. And I'll just, like I said, I'll kind of take the CEO approach and just manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And little by little, as I got the relationships began to develop with the staff, we talked about, well, what do you do where, when you have the opportunity? And so we were going to go into August and really kind of do the new offense with the JV kids and maybe go ahead and just keep the old offense going with the guys we had. And then about a week in, the coaches were like, no, coach, let's just go all in. Let's just go all in. Just let you kind of install the offense, and then we'll call it and do it. And that's kind of where we went, and it was a blast. I think in some ways it got us maybe out of, sometimes you need something new. And I think our kids were successful, and I think allowing them to move into a little different offense, utilizing some of the same stuff they did before, but I think it created that edge that they needed, and our coaches as well. And we just kind of learned how we each did things. And it's one of the more rewarding seasons of my career. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm kind of wanting to pick your brain on is, because you came in during that time of transition and you didn't necessarily put your print on it. I haven't really got to see what a full Bill Blankenship led program looks like.
Right.
So, I want to know, what do you build your foundation on? What do you look for in your student athletes? Whenever I think of, programs have like their hashtags, right? You've got hashtag like all in, or just pride, or yours is 1-0, right? What do you look for? What do you try to implement in your kids when you're building programs?
Well, I think the big thing is, John Mark, we try to, let's go back to hashtags first of all. The things that we try to say over and over again, you already mentioned one of them, 1-0, win every day, win every way, find a way to learn how to win and make that your standard. So that is part of what we do. You see behind me on my bookshelves, Hard, Smart, and Tough. I didn't invent that. They were doing that at Memphis and Virginia Tech. I doubt Coach Fuente invented it, but those are pillars of what we're about. We believe that you got to be hard. That means physically developed. We think you got to be smart. That means intellectually developed. We think you got to be tough. I believe that means spiritually developed. Now, you can take the spirit thing a couple of different ways, but I think toughness is what you are inside you. It's the willingness to stay in a thing. The kids might call it grind, or that's an easy out though. Tough is, are you going to quit?
Right.
Are you going to, when are you out? When are you tapping out? And so we think if there's any characteristic we're trying to teach, it may be that piece of toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what the world calls tough. It's not bowing up to people and wanting to fight and all that stuff. It may be just the opposite. Mm-hmm. Toughness is the willingness to stay in an uncomfortable situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm probably being a little bit pie in the sky, but I think I get to do this at my age. Part of why we do it is, sooner or later, these guys are going to be men, and they're going to have opportunities to quit their job. They're going to have opportunities to quit their wife. They're going to have opportunities to quit their kids. And we don't want to do that, man. We want to be men that stay. We want to be stay the course. Well, how do you do it? You develop a toughness about you. Mm-hmm. I've been married 44 years now. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, it's not always easy. Mm-hmm. There are times, and you just, no, I ain't leaving. We're not going to get out of this deal. We're going to find a way. And I think some of that we develop in our day-to-day. Well, how do you go about doing that? That may be more of the question that we're talking about. I just think every day we hold each other to a standard of, excellence. And like I said, my mom and my dad taught us that, you need to be just as tough in the classroom, just as tough when you're walking the halls, just as tough when you're a citizen. Well, what does that mean? I got to stand up. I got to be counted. I gotta lead. And so we're all about trying to develop leaders that know how to win. And boy, the people that listen to this are going, God, no, I'm not talking about the scoreboard. The scoreboard will take care of it. If you learn how to win on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, Friday will take care of itself.
Absolutely.
Saturday will take care of itself.
Absolutely. The thing that I like most about the 1-0 mentality that you instill in your kids is 1-0 is it's an instant decision, right? It's right. Everything that I come to in every day, I have the opportunity to go 1-0. And so over the course of the day, that's how I win my day. Right? I'm getting better each day. The toughness.
And John Mark, I think you can ask yourself when the day's over, hey, did I win the day? Did I win in that meeting? Did I win? And the winning is not it's with me. Did I bring my best?
Yeah, it's all between the ears.
That piece of it, absolutely. Then we go to another level.
Yeah. So competitive and excellence is some of the things that we strive for especially in the football world, but it goes outside as well. But when you're working with kids, they say being competitive can't be taught. I kind of disagree with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think clearly it can be taught. Now, how do I change you on the inside? Now, that may be a different question, but I think often we don't bring out the best in our youngsters or in our players competitively because we don't test them competitively. I believe the workouts in the off season need to have some feature of competition in them. When I first came to Owasso, I got to come in January, and so we started from the get-go. And I will just tell you, I think too often, maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's, I just hate to say it this way. I just think we've gotten softer as a culture in that we don't really want to hurt people's feelings. Well, part of the competitive nature is there's got to be a winner and a loser. Okay. And so one of the things we tried to instill is that at the end of every workout, we're going to compete. And the loser has some kind of something that he's accountable for. Maybe it's up downs, maybe it's a lap, maybe it's a hand clap, something, but the winner we're going to celebrate. And it is amazing what happens when you start teaching people that there is a result to losing. It's not just a score. We don't just walk away and shake hands and say, but there is something about us that wants to succeed if there is something at stake. And so as simple as, putting up downs on it, I put guys out and we match them up, and I let the team, hey, you guys that believe he's going to win, stand over here. And the guys that believe he's going to win, stand over here. And then whoever loses, all of y'all do up downs, and all of you guys, get to go first when we go eat or something. I mean, it's little things, but I think you learn how to compete and to bring more out of yourself. Now, there may be some that are more gifted, that have that, that nature in them. And so we just want to hone that in a little more.
One thing you're talking about is like having guys choose sides, right? And doing it in the weight room in your off season and making sure that you're building a competitive spirit. One of the things that I first saw, and this goes way back to my days of working with Coach Traylor, was encouragement in everything that we do, right? It's such a key deal that I feel a lot of programs really sleep on, especially in the weight room. You got guys maxing out. Why not have 30 guys standing around and screaming?
Absolutely.
You got two guys competing against each other. Why not make them pick sides? Right. And then teach them that there's something to lose in, or there's something, right? There's things to gain, there's things to lose. but how do you implement that going into a new program? Because I know, like, whenever we were at Fayetteville, one of the things that, I'm not gonna say it drove you nuts, but it was almost like we were so numb to winning that it was, I remember hearing you say that we were just like, whoa, we won.
That's true, bro. I'm telling
Yeah.
you, it did drive me crazy
Yeah.
because, and again, I'm going to say this. I don't want people to take this out of context. I loved my time at Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm.
I loved our guys, but they really had embraced the old Fayette chill kind of thing. I mean, we were pretty cool, and we were pretty, and we won a lot. And so we didn't get too fired up, and we didn't. And I brought in videos. I don't know if you remember this,
mm-hmm.
but I brought in videos of college teams and their red shirt crew on the sideline, twirling towels and jumping up and down and getting it going. Because I felt like we didn't have any juice. Mm-hmm. I mean, we played hard, mm-hmm. but man, this game's designed to be fun. And I want people out there, high-fiving and swinging towels and cheering and jumping up and down. And all of a sudden, you realize it's not about me. We're in doing this together. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I think that's pretty incredible. Now, back to your point of kind of teaching it. And I don't know that there's anything in football I invented. I just learn and steal and take from other people. But we had off-season workouts at the University of Tulsa. And we would do the county fair thing. You'd have a certain drill going on over here and a certain drill over here and a mat drill and this, and you'd rotate from side to side. And we felt like it was so important that one station was basically cheerleading station. So when you rotated to this station, your whole job was to go to the other dudes and start cheering them through their workout. And it's just a 3-minute deal. But I think it was trying to emphasize to our players how much encouragement meant to one another. My mom is an English teacher. Drop a little knowledge on you. Sure you know this, but the old word encouragement has actually got a prefix en, which means to put into, and the root word is courage. So I really think encouragement gives young men the courage to actually compete and play the game. And so the opposite of that is, what if you say something discouraging? What does that mean you're doing? You're literally mm-hmm. taking courage out of a guy who would have it otherwise. So, we get to choose. I sure think encouragement is more about how we build people up.
I agree with you. I didn't know about the encouragement and putting it in.
See, there you go. Knowledge, baby.
Knowledge. Hey, we got to learn something every day. Want to know right there. So no, that's, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know your mom was an English teacher.
Yeah.
So no, I like the idea of making it such a thing that you implement it in your workouts, and especially at Tulsa when you've got a 3-minute station where you're going, okay, like your job right now is to not work out, but to go build up your
right. It kind of blew their mind at first, but then they realized the value of, and let me just go a little further with it. Most of the time when you're doing these county fair workouts, what are you trying to do? Survive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's killing me, coach. Mm-hmm. I'm going to grind through and I'm going to survive. Well, that's about me. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden we flip the script. You get to this station and you get a breather, but this ain't about you getting a breather. This is about you going and helping somebody else get through their station. And then as soon as I get to that one that's kicking my butt, somebody's there encouraging me too. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a way to show the value of what encouragement can do for us.
So let me tell you, I don't know if you need a little closure on this or not, but I had actually visited a Fayetteville game the year after you left, and it was early in the season. And so I saw leftovers from where you were there. You know, one of the big deals that we had talked about was, we wanted kids jumping up and down on the sidelines. We wanted to have fun. And I remember during your tenure, at one point I looked over and we had just scored a touchdown. We're getting ready to kick off. And there's 40 kids jumping on the 50 right along with the music, having a blast.
Right.
Well, after you leave, the kids were still doing that.
That's awesome.
So it had stayed there. It was such a powerful thing that so many guys sleep on. I don't understand it. But so you had talked about your mom a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Let's go back to kind of the early days before you started coaching. Who influenced you the most when you were growing up?
Well, I had really, really strong parents. And so start with that. And that's boring to a lot of people, but I was the middle son of 3 boys. So we were a big boy family. My mom was an English teacher. I'd already mentioned that. She'd grown up and she would like to make sure we knew she was a pretty good athlete. She was a good basketball player and did all that. My dad was an old school coach. And so if you realize how old I am and think about my dad, when my dad was coaching, we were down in a little town called Spiro down on the Arkansas-Oklahoma border. And in Spiro, my dad was head football coach. He was a boys basketball coach. He was a girls basketball coach, coached track, and he was baseball coach all summer. And so my dad was just coach. And it wasn't about a sport. It was about coaching, you know, and that was just his life. He was also a math teacher. Dude wore a flat top and, you know, had the butch wax to tie, you know, tie it all together, big old arms. I mean, we tease, there's not, you know, some of it's probably more truth than anything, but, you know, in our family, we had a tough dad and, you know, drinking and carrying on and all the stuff that we'd call partying now. We just didn't do because we knew first offense would result in a death penalty. So, I mean, it's just kind of the way we kind of felt about it. But anyway, I grew up just going from sport to sport to sport because that was the way that they were. But the other thing, it was my mom's influence was we're not just going to do ball. I mean, we're going to be good students. We're going to take care of all of our business. We're there, you know, and I'm sure other parents do this, but I must have heard it a million times. Pretty good's not good enough for Blankenship. We're going to do, you know, our very best. And, you know, that ought to be the best and that ought, you know, whatever. But that they just held me to a real high standard. By the time I got into high school, my dad became the high school principal. So I didn't play for my dad, but yet he continued to coach me at the house. And you can imagine whether, you know, we're boxing out, getting rebounds or, you know, ball handling or whatever it was. He continued to coach me. My older brother set a pace for us, my younger brother, and we were kind of all about that. I had amazing coaches. So I got it at home. My high school coach, LD Johnson, is in the Oklahoma High School Hall of Fame. I get a chance to go to the University of Tulsa on a football scholarship. I'm recruited by a guy named F.A. Dry, who's a legend on developing offensive football. The first quarterback coach I had was a guy named Jerry Rome. Only old people would remember him, but he was a runner-up to the Heisman and had set NCAA records throwing the ball, and that guy's my quarterback coach. Later on, F.A. left. John Cooper came to be my coach. Well, Coach Cooper's in the College Hall of Fame, wound up his career at Ohio State for years. Well, his last quarterback coach he gave to me my senior year, a guy named Larry Coker, who, again, went all over everywhere and won a national championship, University of Miami. So I just had incredible men in my life. Good coaches that passed by. And I was also, I'll say this, I hope you catch this a little bit. I was a biology major. I didn't think I was going to coach. I was going to go get a real job, but I do know what osmosis is. And I think I was around so many good coaches that I absorbed so much football by osmosis. And I wound up getting a chance to go into coaching. I did not have it on my agenda, didn't think that's what I'm going to do. And I basically tried it out and realized this is what I think I'm made to do. And went through a whole lot of obstacles and a lot of successes. But, you know, just because you figure out maybe what your purpose is or what you believe God made you to do doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
That's right.
And so I had finally figured out that I think this coaching gig is exactly what I was made to do. And the place I was at closed the school down. It's a little private school, so they closed down. I'm like, well, that's real good. I thought I had it all figured out. Now I'm unemployed.
Yeah.
So little by little, you just kind of find your way. But I think my coaches and some teachers were probably the people that most influenced me.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I learned a long time ago. I currently don't work in the coaching field, but I've got a boss that whenever I would ask him a question, man, he would talk about something else for 20 minutes and then come back and answer the question just like you did.
I started saying like me.
Yeah. But that's like a true sign of like how intelligent you are, you know, and that you can just kind of come around and full circle, do something like, I can't do that. But anyways, now it is cool that you've got, you know, all those people, all those coaches that rubbed off on you through osmosis, biology major, all the things that you had going on growing up. And one thing that you mentioned in there is that, you know, you're called to do something. It still doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but you know, it is my opinion that a calling is something that God puts down on your life. Are you involved in programs like FCA? How do you implement your faith in your programs? Those kind of things.
Okay. Yes. The short answer is yes. That too has evolved over the years. I actually got introduced to FCA when I was in college. It was the first time. Now, let me go back because we talked about my parents a little bit. I was raised in a Christian home, and I don't take that lightly. They really were the right kind of parents in terms of leading us down a path where it would be our own decision, but we would have the influence of them and the church and all those people that we were involved in. So that was pretty cool.
So let me cut you off real quick, just to make sure that I give the acronym. FCA is Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Absolutely.
But keep going.
Okay. So I go to college, and I'm trying to put that in perspective. So here's a kid that's been in church. I've been involved, you know, far from being, you know, figuring it all out. But I thought I was a pretty good believer. But, you know, really when I look back on it, kind of my high school was about kind of being wherever you are. So if I was at church, at the youth group, I'd kind of plug in the youth group because I like being there. But if it was after the game and there might be a party, I'd probably go do that. If it was, I'd probably go do that. I just was kind of doing like everything. I went to college, and I remember getting a letter to all of us freshmen coming in that there was going to be this meeting up in the dorm and, you know, in the lobby, and it was called FCA and Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I didn't really know what that was, but I'm like, I know this, the starting quarterback and the starting wide receiver that I thought were pretty darn good signed the letter. And I'm like, well, I better go figure out what those guys are doing, because, you know, that's kind of who I want to be. I show up, and there are some big old linemen one dude that eventually played for the Minnesota Vikings for a bunch of years. I mean, one of the tough guys, and he's just sitting there with his Bible in his hand. I go around and I see this other guy that's like a linebacker that'll turn your lights out, and he's over there with a Bible. And I'm like, this is like the first time I've ever seen people kind of living their faith outside of church. And so it kind of messed with me a little bit. And, you know, I was used to turning it on and turning it off depending on where I was. And so, short version, not to just preach to you, but that experience over the course of my early, probably my freshman year, began to help my faith evolve to being an all the time thing. It wasn't something that was just a, you know, when I'd go to church or when I was around other Christians. It began to be a lifestyle. And I found out that I could still be a tough football player. I could still be an incredible competitor and still honor my faith. And so that was, I think, those were the pieces maybe that I'd been missing at the time. And my faith began to grow and become a little more real. Not a little more, but a lot more real. And I think that kind of put me on a path to seeing that coaching, athletics, all this can be a platform for sharing our faith.
So it's interesting that you call it a platform. Whenever I got out of college, I went and had an interview with a guy named Kerry Lane. And Kerry is, he's a head coach at Pine Tree High School in Longview, Texas. And he was on year 2 of his tenure. He's a young guy. And I remember sitting down in this interview and him asked me, what does football mean to you? And I'm like, well, I just love the game. You know, I want to coach it, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, I think you're wrong. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, it is actually a foundation of which we use to build up young men. He goes, I'm a believer, and I believe that this is an opportunity for me to help young men grow into the men that they're supposed to be. And I have never forgotten that. That was 4 years ago. But it's kind of like you're saying, you know, it's being able to be a believer all the time, to truly be that person 100% of the time in everything that you do. And I've worked with you. I don't think I've ever seen you get, you know, hot to the point to where you're cussing kids out, or, you know, or where your competitive spirit takes over who you are as a Christian. I mean, I've never seen that. And at what point in your coaching career and your playing career, and maybe you just answered it with it being in college, did that really take over?
Well, that's when I've made the commitment to again, not to chase too many church words, but Lord just means boss, just means I'm going to try to honor you. And so there's a difference in knowing God or knowing about him and saying, I want you to be Lord. So I think it was in college when I really began to say, I want to express my life in a relationship where I see you as Lord. And so they kind of began there. Now, don't think for a minute, holy cow, man, don't think for a minute this has been a graph that just goes like this. This thing is up, down, up, down, up, down. I catch myself on a regular basis not living up to the standard. But the awesome thing about that is, I think in general, if you could zoom out to the graph of my life, I think you would see a little bit of an incline of increasing my consistency. But if you zoom into it, you're going to see all these ups and downs and ebbs and flows. You know, I've had to really screw up bad in some ball games to learn how to keep it together. You know, because not just my own embarrassment, but I had to find that when I lose my cool, I actually cheat my kids because I'm not being the best coach I can be. There may be coaches out there that can operate at a seemingly out of control level, yelling and screaming and doing all that, and still help their players. I can't do that. That's not the way I'm made. I have to kind of keep my focus and cool to be able to think, to call plays, to be able to make adjustments. And so I guess all I'm trying to say is thank you that you never saw it. You know, that excites me.
Yeah.
But I also know the struggle I have in my own life, that I'm nowhere near a completed creature in that regard. I'm just very thankful the Lord just gives me grace and mercy and allows me to go on.
You know, another thing they talk about a lot, and especially in church, is humility. Right. That's a real big one that's preached on. And as I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk about, and I kind of dug in a little bit to your career. I mean, you've had a lot of success doing what you're doing. Like, it is very, very obvious to me that your career has been blessed as a football coach. How do you stay humble through the blessings that you've received? Because let me see here, just to give listeners some numbers, you're 154 and 26, and that was at Union High School. before you had taken over to go coach college. Right. And then now I think after your time at Tulsa, you've won, what is it, 2 more state championships? Is it 3 from there? And that's within the past 4 or 5 years, something like that.
We've I'd won a couple of championships at Union before I left, and then did the college thing for a while. Then was fortunate to kind of keep the train on the tracks at Fayetteville. We won that championship in 2016. Came to Owasso and got to be part of their first state championship since 1974. And then we rallied again in 2019 and got another one. So a lot of people like to refer to me as that champion, a guy that has championships. And how do you stay humble? Well, I just know the truth. And any coach worth his salt knows that there's a cliche that says, if you're not humble, you'll soon be humbled. I mean, eventually you're going to be taken down. Well, I like to tell people a little more of my background than that. I got into coaching and I was back at my old high school in Spiro, and we went to the state championship, which was a fabulous deal. But that was in '88 and we lost. Came around and got to the good job at Union High School in Tulsa. And we went back in '94 and lost. We went back in '98 and lost. We went back in '99 and lost. We went back in 2000 and lost again. I didn't think I was ever going to win one. And then we kept staying the course. And I would tell people, if there's any encouragement I can give you, is you got to be in it to win it. The hardest thing in sales, the hardest thing in any job is rejection or loss, or, putting yourself out there and then getting crushed. And let me tell you, putting yourself out in front of thousands and thousands of people and not accomplishing, you feel you're devastated. But the thing I love about competitors is, what do? They're willing to go do it again. Mm-hmm. They just get their soul crushed out in front of thousands of people. And what are they willing to do? Oh, I'll do it again next Friday night. I'll do it again next Saturday or next year. The great ones keep coming back. And I look at the guys, you're gonna see, we're gonna do this later, but we're getting ready for the Super Bowl. We're taping this before then. Mm-hmm. And Mahomes has had a lot of success, but who's he going to go against? Brady. Yeah. And we're talking about Brady's success. Really? Yeah. The last part of his career. Yeah. Talk about his first part of his career and go look at all of the struggles he had to become successful. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's lost on people sometimes, is that, Brady could have quit. Mm-hmm. There's 1,000 dudes that were as good as Brady was early in his career, but they quit because when things don't go your way, it's hard to stay in the game. Well, I just think that's a lesson for all of us. And I go back to that whole lesson on toughness. To me, the tough endure and persevere and give yourself a chance to win the next one. Mm-hmm. And so if there's anything that I'll own up to, is just that I was stubborn enough to stay in the game and keep fighting. Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. I'm as I'm listening to this, let's see here. I'm thinking, what was it? 10, 11 years before you won your first state championship after going 5 times. Yeah. Yeah. And so I got into coaching. Let's put it this way. I got into coaching in '84. Okay. And my first championship was 2002. Okay. So 18 years. Yeah. But I went in '88 and continued going for the next 13 or 14 years before we actually scratched a good one. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to that toughness that you're talking about, and the continued, I don't know, pounding of the fist, as you would say, of going against that and just being a workhorse and doing all those things. And
one of the things that I was sitting here thinking about while you're talking about this is, while you and I can sit here and talk about coaching, coaching isn't everybody's career.
Right.
Right. What does a student athlete take from your program and implement in the business world or any other field that they may go into?
Well, that's a great question. And I want to follow up with that, starting off by saying, if we're only developing college players, then there's about 95% of the team that shouldn't be here. Because we're only going to send about 5% at best to the next level to play. And so I think it's really important that we embrace the fact that what we're trying to accomplish is a lot like your coach down at Longview was talking about. I mean, I'm trying to develop young men that are going to be successful. And so let's just think about that. How about I hold them accountable for being on time? And if nothing else, you learn how to show up on time at work. Well, then how about I hold them accountable for giving me a good day's work in practice? Well, maybe I'm not the only one, but maybe they've learned how to go give their employer a good day's work. Well, what about being a teammate? Maybe we've learned how to be a good teammate and how we've learned that it's not all about us and that we can accomplish more together than we can do by ourselves. Well, now I go out in the business world and the same thing. I'm finding out that I can do more with others, that I can bring them together. What if I say you've got to stand up and call people out or stand up and speak up, when something's not right on this team? Well, maybe you're in the community and you see injustice or you see discrimination. Well, maybe you'll stand up and say, this isn't right. Well, I know on most teams, they're not made of people that are 100% like them. I mean, we don't have very many teams out there where all the socioeconomic things are all exactly the same. What I love is the left tackle's playing by a left guard that's playing by a center, that those guys may be from completely different socioeconomic backgrounds. There were years I had a multimillionaire son playing next to a inner city kid, playing next to a Muslim, playing next to and just go down through all of these backgrounds, and they can learn that they can accomplish something. Come on now. I think we can take that into the real world and hopefully see that there's value in, being a teammate to everybody else out there.
I saw a lot go on this past year, especially like right before the season started. You've got, I guess, your pre-fall camp, all that going on, and a lot of coaches would really take the time. It was kind of in the thick of some of the racial issues that we had.
Sure, absolutely.
And what's funny about what you just said is really the message of what you're getting across as a football coach doesn't change. All you really had to do is just reinforce it. Right? Hey, we're all teammates here. We're all trying to accomplish the same goals. I mean, what was that like? Was it any different than what your normal message is?
Well, it was a little bit, because I think we all have to learn that sometimes you got to quit talking and start listening. The hardest thing is feeling like you're doing the right thing and you still don't understand. We were in the pandemic during the George Floyd issues, and so I wasn't seeing my team on a regular basis, but I was seeing our coaches. I have friends of other backgrounds. It was hard to understand that I want to have a talk, and some people are hurt. Okay. And so you actually need to have a listen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not in, as a coach, I like to talk, man. I want you to hear me. And I think there's a time you have to just turn it around and begin to be a better listener so that you can feel what your teammates, your players, your friends, try to, the whole idea of empathy is just putting yourself in their skin a little bit to feel what they're feeling. And I have a pastor friend who's semi-retired, and he's mentoring a young preacher. And that preacher was asked, this had nothing to do with racial issues, but I learned a hard lesson, or a good lesson. The young preacher was going to have to go do a funeral for a toddler that was tragically killed. And he asked my buddy, give me some advice, give me some guidance, give me some, what do I say when I go visit this family? And the wiser, older preacher said, you've got to understand, you can't speak to the head, you've got to speak to the heart. And so there are times when people are hurting. This is not the time for a debate. Mm-hmm. When people are hurting is a time for you to listen and speak to their heart and to care for each other. And so I think that helped me when I got back with my team to not feel like it was time for me to have a lecture on, fairness and discipline and all these kind of things that we all, that I felt like might be part of the discussion. No, I think it was time to give people the chance to be heard and to understand that I need to get myself to where I hear you, and hopefully you're going to want to hear me later on. So mm-hmm. I don't know. That's a big rabbit getting chased, but hopefully there's some little piece of that.
That's good. I mean, have a talk and just actually be willing to listen. Yeah. As sales guys and head coaches, both of us are talkers.
Well, we're usually trying to figure out what we're going to say while we're listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just listening.
That's right. I guess if I had to wrap it up with, a last question. Let me see what I got in here. I don't know. I've kind of asked a lot about your career. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to talk about?
John Mark, I'd finish with this for me, and it may segue for something for you. I had an old boss that told me that life is a contact sport.
Okay.
And he was kind of winking when he would say that. But if we miss the relationship piece, we're really missing the reality of this life that we get to share. And so I go back, and you kind of hit on it just a little bit, but I only spent one season at Fayetteville. My life is not in Fayetteville. But here we are, you and I, staying connected from one season together. When we talked on the phone, we were talking about a mutual friend.
Yep.
That's coaching, and I stay in touch with him, and you do as well. Mm-hmm. And you guys were both student coaches at the time. Some of the guys that you worked for and that I worked with, I continue to stay in touch with, that we've developed these friendships. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm saying that to encourage you and everybody else that if we just navigate life about us, we're going to wake up and be very empty one day. But I love the fact that I know that I can follow you on Facebook, that I can see what you're up to, and I can celebrate your journey. The fact that you're doing this podcast, man, that fires me up.
Let's go.
Because I know you're giving back. I mean, you're doing stuff to, you're not just a lost young, guy, that is trying to figure out life. You're actually accomplishing. And I would say that again, our coach down at Pine Tree, is that where it was? Pine.
Yeah, Terry.
Yeah. I think Coach Terry would tell you, you've got a pretty good foundation and platform you're working on right now in this business.
Yeah.
So how cool is that?
It is cool. I mean, it really is. I started this deal because I felt like I wasn't using my spiritual gifts. Right. That's it. You got spiritual gifts of teaching, encouragement, leadership,
right.
All the stuff that's in Romans 12, and mine are leadership and encouragement.
There you go.
So I didn't really feel like I was using the relationships that I had. And so doing this podcast has allowed me to kind of reconnect with those relationships, rebuild them. And it's like, I don't know, I hadn't talked to you and God knows how long, but
right.
The relationship is still there. And so it's been a real pleasure to reconnect and take the time, Coach.
Well, it's been my pleasure, because as you get older, you're going to understand this even means more to you. And just to know that we have some good memories from those days, we're going to share that time. And you call me anytime, brother.
Will do. Yeah. So is there any way that anybody listening can follow you?
Absolutely.
Go ahead and plug yourself.
Okay. A couple of things. You can find me on Twitter, Coach B Blank. That's an easy way to do it. If you want to shoot me an email, coachblank@outlook.com. That's an easy one as well. Now, Twitter is Coach B Blank. Emails coachblank@outlook.com. Reach out to me, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's it. Be sure to go by and watch the Rams play too. He's got an exciting offense.
We do.
Yeah.
We're going to have a good one. So
I know you will. So hopefully I can come by and see you guys this next season.
Hope so.
That'd
be awesome.
So, Coach, thanks again for your time. Much appreciated.
1-0.
1-0. Go Rams. Later.